Good evening. In today's video, I just want to talk about two concepts which might not seem related at the beginning, but they're actually related. The first thing is just to talk about how our idea and our perception and our need for information is going to change over time. And the books that might have impacted you maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and maybe when you read to them, you have a different perspective. However, they're a very special place in your heart. And then the second thing was to just briefly cover a system that I do to try and keep all the information that I enjoy to collate and how I'm putting up in the system, and that I can share. Maybe that could be helpful to you, and the importance of having a database system that you can easily access and get back and dig in the information, and then you then pair it to actually then track to say, oh, this is something that I've actually valued and this was my position at the beginning point in time, but now based on this information and what has changed and the growth that has happened in my evolution as a person, I am now here. Talk about books that have an impact at a certain stage of our life or at a particular point in life, which then later on maybe you then grow and interchange. So for me, a book that I found very, I'll probably say life-changing or changed my perspective was Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was 15, I was in high school, and one of my high school friends had this book, and I just liked to read, and I read it. And at that point in time, I was actually on the path of do chemistry and engineering, and I knew that I wanted to do something that was associated with business. And obviously at that point in time, the way that I eventually took path to be businesses is to get into accounting, which is what I still do. But in the middle of that, I dabbled into different business and everything, and the book was life-changing. And basically, Robert Kiyosaki put together like a framework of the 4 concepts. It's very easy to understand. It was very simply written, and at that stage of my life, I started to know what assets and liabilities. It might be a different definition to what accountants define assets and liabilities to be, but it was a definition that was worth considering, which basically to say, an asset is something that puts money into your pocket and a liability takes money out of your pocket. The accountant head of me would tell you something different, but in a nutshell, that's basically the essence of it. Anyway, and it talks about how, working as an individual, small business, eventually being an investor, and things of that nature. Another book that I read at a very early stage of life was the book Think and Grow Rich. I guess you can see the theme that young man really wanted to get rich, and I think it was probably the product of the environment where I was, where basically just finding emancipation. And it really talked about the concepts in the book were about how opening your mind and how to wish things into existence and things along that nature. So I think those books were very helpful. I'm trying to remember some of the titles that I read at that time that really set a path in terms of thinking about ownership and the influence of the decisions and the actions that I take as an individual, and how that has a long-term impact on what I do. So anyway, in a nutshell, I'm saying this. So this week I have I'm much older, this is more than 15 years later, and I'm looking at this. So I was just reading through the internet, and obviously now with the knowledge that I have, I have been building on this over the years, and I must say that I hunger, or I'm very much interested in depth, or I'm interested in the bones. I'm saying, give me the substance, give me something, back up a position, and go and essentially say go deeper. And so I was reading through this, and then this guy and the whole entire website where they were just focusing on, is this person legit, in terms of the concept that Robert Kiyosaki puts in his book to say that this is what it should be, and yet and then I was just thinking, I was conflicted in the sense that older me and where I am right now, I definitely do appreciate and comprehend that, yes, you need to, the book might be a little bit light, but it did light a match to start a process, or it lighted something that was going to change the way that I think about it. So then I was just kind of thinking about, then appreciating about how our evolution as individuals, to say that there's sometimes that maybe I just need to start. I just need to get the ball rolling, or have an interest in a certain subject, but that doesn't mean that that interest is always going to be the interest that is that. So as I was saying, I was just sort of thinking big picture to say that I now have the tools based on the multiple years of reading that I'm doing, that I know I understand. Like, say, if I'm looking at a concept of, say, for example, investing or real estate or any other concepts, like, and maybe I do have capital that I'm ready to deploy, I may not base my whole strategy based on the information that is in a book like Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? Maybe I need more detailed information. I need something that's going to go into the deep in terms of a structure that you can base the whole strategy on. But I acknowledge that the fact that the fire is started by this thing. So I just found that fascinating, that something that could have been quite helpful at a certain stage in life may no longer be as relevant as it is today, and other people may look at it from that perspective. So that's essentially what I wanted to just talk about at a high level, to say that the shift that happens, like something that was quite influential is no longer as influential. And the second part of what I wanted to talk about today as well is just about how to retain all this information. So I was having a conversation yesterday with my guy Trey, who cuts my hair, and he was encouraging me to talk about the system that I have. And I was like, I'm going to put together the system, but however, like some of the ideas that I have, I like to put things together in a sort of like an archive or a database that I put together. And the reason I do that is because one of my values that I'm very passionate about is the love of knowledge. So essentially, I have like a massive system that is already going on, in the sense that I'm just binging on various new information, and then I just put it into the system. And by the system, that's Rome research. So I'm reading about something, I'll put like the condensation of the notes that I'm thinking about, and then I put it in a summary. And I just keep it in there, and then I usually group it by subject, and then it's essentially slowly becoming like my own personal database that I get back to. So the thing is, one of the things that I find very helpful is I will remember a conversation, or I'll remember reading something, or I will remember something, but I remember the idea of it, or almost like it's grayed out in a way in my mind. However, I'm able to search. So the reason I've been actually putting this together is essentially, I have found that I cannot 100% rely on my memory alone, because in a way, every time if I'm driving and I'm driving with my wife, I will ask her like, oh, did you see that? And she obviously didn't see it, because the way that her brain and what it's filtering is filtering based on the basis of what it thinks is important. And the same thing happens with our mind and what we think. Therefore, I think it's good to have like physical backup. So I will write down, or maybe something that I'm feeling, or an idea that I'm thinking about, and essentially I'm collecting, because I used to find out that sometimes I would do some research on a subject. So I would say, for example, okay, what is the key criteria of what would make an A grade investment in ABCD, and then I just use that as the basis to say, okay, this tab. So what would you normally do? You open up a bunch of tabs on the internet, and then you start researching them, and then you forget it, you leave it alone. What I've actually found is that sometimes I feel like that is leaving an open loop. So I've left an open loop that I haven't closed, where I'll have eventually to come back to it and essentially start again from scratch. But if I have this information that I've saved at some point in time, what I would do is I'm reading about this chapter, and I come back to it, and then I either refine it, or I build on it, or I get a refresher in my mind in terms of what I thought about something. Then at least I can track the way that I feel about an idea, or I feel about a concept and track it through time. So that's my sort of essential process. I'll do a proper breakdown of everything that I do. There is obviously a disadvantage. I think the disadvantage is you can become a digital hoarder. So basically meaning is that you just extracting a whole bunch of information, thinking that I'm going to use it at some point in time, and maybe you actually never come back to that information. So I found that, you know, you could find like multiple voice notes, or you've got multiple memos, but you're actually not really coming back to them. And apparently part of that is that maybe sometimes some of these things are actually not important to our brain. So I was saying, like, we all have this filtering system, and this filtering is, and one way that I've been finding out is that the best way to find out what is actually truly important is to write about a subject. So write down, like, this is the topic that I'm going to be talking about, and when you write it all up, essentially you're cutting through, and all the great books that we read, that's what essentially the author has done. They've looked at an idea and a concept and say, okay, 48 laws of power. There's so many ideas about what could, but then they just cut through it with a bunch of ideas that they're putting together. So I think that's really interesting. So for me, that's sort of like the place. It's a bit of a balancing act where I want to keep the information, but however, I'm also wondering, like, you don't want to just be a person who's digitally hoarding, because it has to sort of be aligned and in the same direction of what the overall goal is. So anyway, I know that I've spoken about key things, but anyway, in a nutshell, the purpose of this video was to talk about how our mindset and how our perceptions of things change in time. I hope you enjoyed this. Leave a comment, and as well as ideas of other topics that you'd like me to talk about. Have a good one. Bye.